Yes. Hi, John.
I know the official was like, if you're talking, it's okay to take it off, which is really contrary to.
I don't, yeah, I was gonna say,
From medical professionals.
Talking, if you're talking about safety, talking is when you should be wearing it.
Yeah, but I think it's more for clarity of understanding, and we are very spread out, so.
I'm gonna go ahead and start streaming. Just get that going a couple minutes early. I think, I heard Mr. Jackson isn't gonna be able to come, so I think this is everybody if he's,
Did you say that?
if he's not coming.
Somebody
I
said
did.
you said he's not coming.
Yeah,
No, he's in Florida.
Mr. Murray.
He won't be here, but we can't start it early, but we got another 2 minutes, so.
Well, we're streaming live, just so you know.
I'm sorry?
We're streaming live, just so everyone knows.
Oh, thank you, yeah,
Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah.
Enough idle chit chat.
right.
Good heads up for me.
We
They advise us to do that a little bit early.
got another minute.
Eggs.
So my understanding, you don't want to till the stroke of 5?
No, you can't.
Okay.
It started early, somebody might want to be here, yeah, it's not legal to, yeah. I think 5 minutes late is on time. We should have a bell, like a school.
A really big sand timer would be more fun. That's 5.
Yeah, I got 5.
You ready?
Yeah,
Okay.
let her rip.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. As current vice chair of this commission, I'm going to call the January 26, 2022 Planning Commission to order. And I guess I would ask staff to call the roll.
Mr. McGorry,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Zuloff,
Here,
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Whalen,
Here.
Ms. Castillo. Here. Mr. Bajali.
Here. And I would, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'd like to note for the minutes that Mr. Murray did contact me and indicated Mr. Jackson would like to be excused for this meeting. He's in Florida.
Thank you. And Mr. Bajali, I'd like to welcome you
Thank you.
on behalf of all the commissioners to the Planning Commission. It's my understanding that you are the representative from the City Commission now in place or replacing Mr. Murray.
Correct.
Okay, well, welcome aboard. Do we need to excuse Mr. Jackson, or we just go on?
we never have.
Okay. Okay, well then, the next order of business on the agenda is the matter of approving the minutes from the December 22nd, 2021 meeting at which I was absent, but I have read those minutes. Does anybody care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move they be approved as distributed.
Okay, is there a second to that?
A second.
Okay, Mr. Wellen. I guess I'll call a vote on that then, or is there any discussion on the content of the minutes? Hearing none, call a vote. All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. They've been approved. The next matter on our agenda is the election of officers for this current year. Does anybody care to make a motion on that?
I would like to nominate Pete McGorry as chair.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay.
Call the question.
I guess call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain to that. Any votes against? Okay.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. I think we need a vice chair, and I would move, if he will accept it, to have Mr. Miller be this year's vice chair. Is there a second to that, to my motion?
Second?
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody against?
Abstain.
Okay. So congratulations, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much.
I don't think there's any other officers we have to deal with, so, okay. So the next item on the agenda is an adjudication hearing for Paper Street Holdings LLC. They've submitted a conditional use permit application for 603 Columbus Avenue. Perhaps the staff could educate us on this application a little.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everybody. 603 Columbus Ave has applied for a conditional use permit. The site is currently zoned local business. The adjacent zoning to the north is local business, to the east is local business, to the south is local business, and to the west is local business / residential two-family. The existing use of this site is office space, and the proposed use is office with an addition to transient rental.
Real quick, Alec, can I just,
Yeah, sure.
I just want to insert a high level for any members of the public that have been following this conversation about transient rental. And for the planning commissioner, Mr. Vajali, I don't think you were on the commission yet when I saw an email. We have been discussing the potential for local business to allow transient rental as part of an overall transient rental conversation among planning commission for a couple meetings now. It seemed like the conversation was going that direction. People were generally in favor of that. That was at least the temperature I was getting from what I heard commissioners mention. It seemed like conditional use might even be something that the commissioners were interested in. And I actually had someone point out to me that kind of slightly buried in the code that's existing today, it actually is permitted as a conditional use in our zoning. So you'll see, and Mr. Oaks will cover that, but the main uses set forth in general business district are permitted in local business district if a conditional use permit is granted. So previously this is the first case like this because we did not, as a staff, realize that that was already embedded in the code. Because transient rental is a main use in general business, it can be approvable in local business with a conditional use permit. So I just wanted to give that kind of intro for this case.
Thank you, Ms. Blair. I will keep going. The site currently has a building on it. It's L-shaped. The building is on the corner of Columbus and Madison, and the building covers roughly 27% of the parcel. The facade of the building facing Columbus Ave is a two-story brick building defined by an open gable roof and central columns at the entryway, and the Madison Street side, which is the northern side of this building, appears to be an addition separated by a firewall to the Columbus Ave facing building. There's a single-story brick structure with separate suite entrances under a covered porch and alternate entrances at the parking lot. The spaces in the building had been used as an office space, but are currently vacant. There are currently 25 existing off-street parking spaces totaling around 12,400 square feet of parking area coverage. And the adjacent western parcel is also the one that's also zoned local business, is owned by the applicant. The applicant wishes to use some of the space in the one-story structure for transient rentals on the Madison Street side. Approximately 3,000 square feet would be used for this, which would equal roughly 3 units. If you see the site plan here, that's the part highlighted in red is the part we're focusing on the 3 units. And then the remaining 6,500 square feet will be used for professional office space or retail. An additional 4th unit has been mentioned by the applicant as a phase 2. And the square footage of the 4th unit is not known at this time. The zoning currently permits transient rental and local business with a conditional use permit. And like Ms. Blair had said, if you go to local business, it says directly that the general business district may be permitted in local business with a conditional use permit. And after you go to general business, you jump over to roadside business, which is permitted through general business, and it allows transient occupancy. So that's how we got to this point. So staff's analysis is, I'll run through the staff analysis on like how we determine this to be a conditional use. So the first part The property is within a 10-minute walk to downtown Sandusky, and based on the 2018 top priorities and the Bicentennial Comprehensive Plan, staff believes this property will increase walkability to the downtown corridor, make Sandusky more of a destination city with additional transient rental options available. And that's the top part of what's on the screen. So option A, this use will serve community needs by helping to fill the high demand for additional transient rental units, walkability to our downtown business district. Option B, this is not an intensive use that would be considered inappropriate to be near schools, churches, and other places of assembly. Option C, the proposed use will not be objectable to nearby dwellings. Brew pubs are permitted in this district, which by nature create more noise, dust, etc., than the proposed use based on staff analysis. Option D, the site is surrounded by residential and commercial uses. Transient rentals are a form of residential use that provide a harmonious buffer between the residential surrounding properties and the commercial corridor along Columbus Ave. Option E, the use of transient rentals are currently permitted is the next, excuse me, let me start that. The use of transient rental is currently permitted in the next less restrictive district, which is roadside business. The proposed use is in increasing demand of modern devices and improvements and is appropriate in the local business district on a case-by-case basis. And option F, the proposed use will not be more hazardous than traffic created by brew pubs or retail stores, as these establishments create a higher volume of turnover traffic. Staff would like to additionally note, the applicant has stated this fourth unit is part of a phase 2, like I had mentioned. The unit would have access from the Madison Street via the covered porch portion, and it would also have a back entry from the parking lot. The applicant has stated that it'll be separate from the office space. The entranceway from the Columbus Avenue side will be blocked off, so there won't be any collaboration between the businesses and this unit. The applicant stated that depending on how quickly the commercial space can be occupied, the fourth unit may be essential to the viability of this entire project. And if it would be considered a phase 2 and approved, that they begin construction as early as 2023. Staff is supportive of the additional fourth unit to be implemented as a phase 2 in this application. We would like to see the upstairs unit on the corner, which the applicant is proposing to be office. We would like to see that continue to be office. So today, Planning Commission has the following 3 options from staff, and it's to approve or deny transient rental as a use for the entire parcel, approve or deny transient rental as a use for the proposed 3 units only, or to approve or deny transient rental as a use for the proposed 3 units and the potential 4th unit. Other departments had no comments or concerns prior to this meeting. And in conclusion, staff fully supports the initial proposal of 3 units facing Madison Street. If the Planning Commission is inclined to also grant the preliminary idea of the 4th unit, staff is also supportive of it. If not, we recommend the applicant return to the commission to apply for another conditional use permit when the idea is more than preliminary. And in conclusion, staff recommends the approval of the proposed conditional use at 603 Columbus Ave with the following 2 conditions, which are that all permits are obtained through the building, engineering, and planning departments, and that the projects do not exceed the proposed 4 units stated previously. If the commercial space lacks consistent occupancy, staff recommends applying again for a conditional use permit no less than 2 years from the current conditional use permit issuing date for the 4th unit.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
quick question
Zillow.
here. Which of these options, we always have options, I'm sort of surprised to see them enumerated as, obviously there might even be more. Which most closely correlates with what the applicant is asking for?
Probably option 3.
Okay. It seems like the first option would be the most permissive, is that correct?
Yeah, it would allow transient in the entire parcel, which means any unit,
Right.
business, or likewise
Right.
would be permitted, so.
And it seems to me that if it's appropriate on the long leg of the L there, it's appropriate on the whole building, maybe even more so on Columbus. Just to back up about the comments that Aaron made about the ordinance. This discussion of the flaws in the ordinance goes way back, and I think it was an oversight. And the problem with taking a look at an ordinance, finding it inconvenient, wanting to change it is, if you don't really think about it for a long time and really deliberate it, you don't realize that maybe you could make it worse. It's really a pretty good ordinance. Local business could impact the neighborhood in ways that a general business might not. So the wisdom of allowing a conditional use permit just so that you review, yeah, we're not going to let you do everything you can do in general business, but we might, depending on the particular case. I think it's a really well-written ordinance, and I think that phrase that's buried in there, belongs in there, was probably quite deliberate and quite wise to put in there. I'm glad we figured it out. Seems to me that this is a case where it makes sense to do the whole building, but if the applicant doesn't want that, I wouldn't do that either. But it seems to me that if it makes sense, why not remove that, unnecessary constraints there? So I'd be fine with one, unless the applicant would rather not do it, but I'm also fine giving the applicant exactly what they are looking for.
Thank you. Mr. Oakes, I have a follow-up question, probably the same or similar
Sorry.
Mr. Zuloff had, but I'm just going to ask it a different way.
Okay.
So exactly what is the applicant requesting at this time? Up to 4 units, and that's all they're asking for right now?
That's correct, in a two-phase setup where
Okay.
the one-story corridor on Madison Street would be phase 1, and then phase 2 would be the 4th unit, which would be part of the 2-story.
But they're
Common
asking
space.
for approval totally at this time, even though they wouldn't start the fourth unit until sometime hereafter.
Correct, and that was a staff recommendation. Originally, we were approached with just the 3 units,
Right.
and as a staff, we mentioned that it might be in their favor to just put both on the same application instead of having to come back in 2023 for the
So
4th unit.
If the commission approved the 4 units with the 4th one being a second phase, if it turned out that they did not want to use the 4th one for, I can't think of the term, Airbnb.
Transient, yeah.
Transit rental. And if it turned out that they had a commercial tenant for that 4th, would they have to do anything, or could they just, okay, so if we approved it, they would have the option, but they wouldn't have to go to that 4th one?
Correct.
Okay. I'm inclined personally to approve no more than what's being asked for at this time, and if there's some reason down the road, I guess they could make another application. So those are my thoughts. Anybody else have questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm always concerned about tenant behavior, and especially when it comes to this type of situation with transient rental and Airbnb and those things. I'm wondering if we might be well advised to approve the 3 units and see how those function. And I don't want to make things too cumbersome for people to have to come back and refile an application, but I think that way we can evaluate how that is working out. There's some pretty nice residential in that area, and I would hate to have them have to deal with maybe some tenant-related issues.
This is actually an adjudication hearing, which means people can be sworn in and provide testimony, correct? Okay. So are there any other further questions of staff before we move forward with that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is perhaps just a quibbling fine point, but on page 9 of the staff report, C is the section in the middle of the page. On the 3rd bullet down, it makes reference to the proposed use is increasing demand because of modern devices and improvements. I wondered if there was any elaboration on what are the modern devices and improvements that we're referencing?
Thanks for that question. Item E of the code challenges us to look at the proposed use should be permitted in the next less restrictive district because of its limited nature, modern devices, equipment, or improvements. So when you're approving a conditional use, you're saying this maybe arguably more intensive use should be allowed in this case for this reason. And this, the reason they want you to kind of state is that it's limited in nature and it's due to modern devices, equipment, or improvements. So we were thinking of that, when we read that, we were thinking like, you know, Airbnb is new, it's app-based, it's, you know, modern demand, we see increasing demand because we're a tourist destination.
I see.
So that's where that logic came from with that explanation.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zullo.
I think it might be helpful to clarify that we shouldn't be conflating this transient use with the question of the overlay district for transient use in the residential areas. That's it's still transient rental, but it's irrelevant to that question because there is no overlay required for transient use in a business district, or in this case, in the case of the approval of a conditional use permit, there would be no requirement, no question of that. So it's really a different ordinance for addressing the same use. So let's not conflate those.
Any other further questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Castillo.
considering what Mr. Pajali said, I wondered, it says in here that the fourth unit may be essential to the viability of the entire project. If we could get more, how would it be essential? What would make or break having this fourth unit or not, taking into consideration what Mr. Pajali proposed?
Just based on talking with the applicant, just the investment put into the property, the return, especially if this unit remains vacant for 2 years with no income producing in it, he's concerned that it could detriment his goals with the site and as a whole, just from an income perspective. And I believe the applicant is in the audience if he'd like to add anything further tonight, but that's what I was told from the applicant.
That's my understanding as well. Building on that a little bit, it's currently office space, which can be really hard to rent. I mean, it's great to get office tenants in, but that's kind of what he was worried. He knows that there's a transient rental demand. We have a lot of that, and we hear about it a lot. So just kind of like, yeah, I'd love to see that whole, the Columbus Avenue side be an office building. If I get that tenant, that's great. But if it sits vacant for a while, like Mr. Oaks said, he'd love to build another transient rental unit in there.
I'm prepared to move forward to the hearing part of this application unless somebody has more questions of staff.
I would agree, Mr. Chairman, except that I would like to emphasize that I would like to know how the applicant feels about the three options that are.
Well, that's going to be, they're going to
I'm sure
be sworn in.
I'm sure they will. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have, and this is so nitpicky, but in the application under site plan off-street parking application on page 6 of 8, there's a sentence, all plans submitted to the planning commission must be met, concise, accurate. I wonder if that's just a typo, if it's intended to be neat.
What
Concise,
page?
accurate, page 6 of 8.
Thank you.
In the second paragraph, the first sentence,
No idea what you're looking at. Of the report?
yes.
Page 6
It's
is,
the application itself, I think.
It might be a typo within the application. I noticed that this is a conditional use permit application, but it came with those site plan application pages, which seems like those could be patched.
I'm missing.
Spell check
I just
demons.
thought that was odd and possibly a wrong word, met instead of meet.
Put that, thank you.
Spell checker.
Oh, it's just.
So I would ask that anybody that plans to speak either in favor or against this proposed application stand and be sworn in. Okay, would y'all raise your right hand, and do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay. So I would ask that anyone who is here for the applicant or the applicant themselves come to the podium first, identify themselves, and Tell us what you want us to know.
Good evening, everyone. I am Ross Besh. I am member of Paper Street Holdings LLC. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Mr. Oaks.
Oaks, yep, correct.
Sorry, Ms. Blair, thanks for coming out and meeting with me and discussing this project.
Of course.
I'm open to answer any questions, but I know the one question that has come up twice already or so is what would the applicant like to see out of the three options? Ideally, the whole property, just so there's no need to come back necessarily. I don't see filling office space viable. There's plenty of it available. So I think the fourth unit is going to be needed. So at minimum, option 3, but the ideal situation would be option 1 where we say the whole parcel is eligible for this. Since the planning staff had come out, we've kind of revised where we don't really necessarily want to use that second floor at all for that fourth unit. There's plenty of square footage on the first floor for that unit. We've also signed a tenant for that front corner. We brought a business professional from out of the city limits in. So we've generated some tax revenue already from income tax revenue already. We're working on the main anchor space for a commercial tenant. Unfortunately, this particular entity is already in the city limits. My goal is to bring people from the outside and help with, the income tax and some professional type entity. Could be a great law office. There was a bank in there for a long time. Building was built as a bank in '55. But City Financial was in there for a minute, One Main Financial, and they had the teller space and drive-through down at the other end and such. But I'm open to whatever questions the commission may have for clarification.
So I do have a question.
Sure.
So are you asking for a conditional use permit for transient rental for the entire building, the full L right now? Or are you really asking for the 4 units with the current intent to try to do commercial with the Columbus Avenue side?
Yeah, certainly. Definitely the 3 units, that's the budget is what we're putting into the project. We're going to invest roughly $300,000 on top of purchase price into renovating this space. That's all the budget's going to allow for 3 units with the current market conditions in building. Unfortunately, we'd like to get the 4th unit into that. Again, I'd like to attract commercial space, but the reality is there's a lot available. The advantage we have here is parking. We got the lot behind ours as well that we own. It's all concrete and parking currently. So that's a appeal to a lot of people. But I would prefer at minimum the 4 units because depending on how the season would go, we'd like to start that construction as soon as financially viable.
So I'm still not sure that, are you asking us to approve transient rental for the entire L or just the 4 units for right now, knowing that you can come back down the road if you have to?
If the commission's so inclined for the whole parcel, that would be great, but I would ask today that we go for option 3 for 4 units.
So but 4 units is not the entire L?
Correct.
Okay.
It's the entire first floor going down Mazer Street, even up into the 2-story.
Right, but the Columbus Avenue front part, you're not asking for transient rental approval right now on the Columbus Avenue side?
But the yellow part does go up into Columbus Avenue. The yellow part would be the 4th unit.
Okay.
The orange was added as the second floor. Originally, we
But
had
not
kind of.
the entire Columbus Avenue?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. The south side of that, which
So-
is a large 1,500 square feet, and there is a tenant upstairs that's moving out in May, professional office space. So that will be vacant, but the tenant I have interested is wanting the first and second floor there. They want about 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zula.
the way the questions are framed, it still leaves me wondering what the preference of the applicant would be. So could the applicant please state what would be the first choice, what would be the second choice, and what would be the third choice?
The first choice would be the entire property,
Option one.
Option one.
Thank you. And the second choice?
would be the 4 units.
And the third choice?
That's our bare
obviously,
minimum right
would
now
be
based on the current plans.
the
that we
original
have.
application, but realizing that you could
Yeah,
have
this
other
being the,
options, you would prefer the first choice.
this being the first instance where we were able to find this in the code and bring this to the
Thank you.
commission, didn't want to push the envelope, wanted to be conservative. What we need now is the 3 units.
Safe to say you would have asked for option one if you'd known that it was appropriate.
Sure, yes.
Thank you.
I hate to keep asking the same questions over and over again, but, so are you saying your first choice is you would like the entire building
Right.
conditionally use permitted for transient rental, the entire building, right?
That would be the preferential,
Okay,
yes.
okay, now I understand that, because I thought you were saying, no, I just want the 4-unit approval.
If the commission finds that the entire parcel doesn't fit with what we're proposing, then sure, our next best option would be the 4 units. Next best option would be the 3 units.
Okay, anybody have any?
I have one. So,
Well,
you may not know exactly, or have decided exactly, but you said you have somebody signed for the south end of that L, 20, both floors?
We're in discussions.
Okay. So you don't have a tenant signed for
Correct. I have a tenant signed for the north front corner, on the corner of Madison.
upstairs?
It's about 500 or 600 square feet.
If we did approve here, is that something you would still consider keeping commercial, or would the
I
plan
would
be
definitely keep
to?
the front corner, because I'm gonna share that space with them from a personal office. Yeah, I mean, I like the spreading of risk for commercial transient. The transient can always be used as residential space if the Airbnb industry happens to flop down the road. But yeah, my goal is personally to leave the upstairs on all of the property as commercial and that downstairs on the south side.
any other questions of the
Mr.
applicant?
Chairman,
Jolly?
all of the entrances would be off Madison Street,
There are,
even the 4th unit?
there are entrances on both sides of the property. So the
Okay.
primary entrance for guests of the 3 units and potential 4th unit, they'll actually go to the rear of the property, park off street. They'll enter through the back, the south side of that wing. And then they also have a door on the north side that they can use as a patio of sorts.
The 3 units, when did you anticipate construction would be completed on the first 3?
By end of April.
By the end of April? So,
Live May 1st and accepting visitors by Memorial Day.
and the 4th unit?
We're thinking, we need to get a year under our belt, replenish some finances, and preferably work on that over next winter and be ready to go by Memorial Day the following year.
So you wouldn't come back, you wouldn't have that unit underway until 2023 anyhow, right? Even if we had you come back for a conditional permit for the 4th unit. And my last question is, if we approve just a blanket for the whole building, the transient housing, how many units do you anticipate you would put in there?
We'd never go more than 6. Once you cross that line, you're in a hotel. It's a whole nother
Yeah,
zoning, fire code, everything. So
yeah.
we'd never go more than 6. I would say maybe a 3-bedroom there on that south side in a 2-story setting, and then maybe another unit upstairs above in the north corner there in the Columbus Ave part.
So potentially, if the market fell out, we could have a 6-family, a multifamily in that building? You would go to just renting those units out?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a background in residential rental properties?
I have 5 years. I actually have the most ratings in any property in the city of Sandusky on Airbnb.
Okay.
I have over 500 reviews, 5-star reviews. Been doing this
All
for
right.
5 years.
And if you have a problem tenant along the way, would you flag that tenant for, say, the following year, or if they wanted to come back?
So in the review process with Airbnb and VRBO and the likes, we run on multiple properties. You select at the end of your review, would you host this person again? If you answer no, your property does not show up in their searches any longer. Now, there's ways people could find around that certainly, but we use noise monitoring devices. We use electronic locks so we know when people are coming and going. We set strict sound time frames when people are not supposed to be going in and out. Cameras are going to be on the property. There's going to be no fewer than 18 cameras on this property. In our 5 years, we've had 2 very small problems just with over occupancy. And one we called SPD for a little bit of help. It was nothing violent, just there was a bunch of people. I was extremely outnumbered. And the other one, we told them, hey, you're wrong here, but go ahead and stay the night and leave tomorrow. It never ended up being a problem other than over occupancy.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commission members? Does the applicant have anything further to say personally?
I do not. Again, I do have, I think you asked about, one of you asked about I do have other rental properties as well. So if it were to turn into standard rentals, the company and myself have experience with that, operating those in a compliant manner with the city.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here speaking in favor of the application? Would you like to approach the podium?
Sure. Can I take my mask off?
Yes, you may.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Forgive me if I'm a little jittery. I'm not very good at this. I'm here today. My name is Jess Slipper, and I'm here today on behalf of my boss, Jamie Tallman. She would have liked to have been here, but she's currently renovating her salon, and it's a little bit of a chaotic show in there. So, I also obviously am in favor of expanding the transient zone. A little bit of background for us. It will be 3 years that we have been listed both on the same platforms of Airbnb and Vrbo. The first year was a disaster because of COVID, so it was a lot of bookings and cancellations, and then it was kind of filling up again when Cedar Point reopened. I typed out a statement, and I referred to the properties in this as STRs, which is short-term rentals, because I've learned that I just don't like to view them as a vacation rental, because I'm just surprised at the number of people that come in for different reasons, not just to come and party in our area. So, like I said, my name is Jess Lippert, a lifelong resident of Erie County. First and foremost, I would like to thank everyone here today for the opportunity to speak on the possible expansion of the transient zone within the city. Also, I'd like to interject
Mr.
this.
Chairman, I think there might be some confusion on the
Am I losing it?
topic.
We're talking about his building, right?
Just his building, yes.
Yeah.
I'll step back and wait my turn.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. But you're in favor of his building too?
Thank you for interrupting me.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Anybody else here who wants to speak on behalf of the applicant for this particular application? So, anybody here that wants to speak against the applicant and the application? Mr. Fike.
I'm John Fike, 629 Columbus Avenue. I'm at the opposite end of the block. I'm not here necessarily against what they're asking for. I would hope you would limit it to what he asked for specifically, which was a 3-unit, because we really don't know what we're getting until it's here. And I don't want to find out later on that we've got problems and then I've got to start complaining to either the police department or the health department because of issues. So, number one, I would hope you would limit it to 3. The second thing I'm worried about is we've got 2 other businesses in that block with no off-street parking. This particular building does have off-street parking, but if you looked at the site plan that's up there, the parking lot is in 2 different parcels. My concern is that they may at one point in time want to take the parcel that goes back to Jackson Street and they could sell it off or put another use on it. So my concern, or my hope that you would make as a condition is that you would make them merge those parcels into one large parcel so that the rear parking couldn't be sold off or used for something else. Those are just my concerns. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Fike?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Did you? Yes. Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Fike raises a very important point about the parking. I don't remember if the report talked about whether the site meets all its parking requirements or not. I know that that parking space is underused, but I think that it might be reasonable to do a lot combination if the proposed uses would require that additional parking. And what do we know about whether there's sufficient parking for any conceivable scenario under the proposed conditional use permit?
So the applicant did express that they probably have up to 40 spaces throughout both parcels. We mentioned 25 in the report because those are currently what's painted out for parking. So based on the 40 spot analysis for this current building, staff had no concerns on parking for transient and also retail business. That being said, staff, as of right now, without any further research, would probably be more of a stalemate on the combination of this property. The applicant can come and speak on behalf, but I had conversations with him that there was a future endeavor possibility 5+ years down the road with this secondary parcel for an additional residential unit of some sort. Any further questions can be directed to the applicant. That's unfortunately all that I know at this time, but
you know, we do have parking standards for square footage and number of parking and use. So what you're saying is you're not quite sure what would how many parking spaces would potentially be needed with this application in the worst case scenario.
So worst case scenario, the Airbnb's transient would be 1 per dwelling unit. I believe the 3 units were 2 bedrooms, is that correct?
If it's 1 per dwelling unit, then it's just 1 space per unit. It's
Okay.
vague in the code, so that would be only 4 spaces.
So that'd be 4
required.
spaces.
Because what I know from personal experience, having visited the site several times over the years and recently, is that the parking is so prodigious that, you know, neighbors use it without any complaints as far as I can tell from at least prior owners. So the potential might be there to have enough to maybe even break off part of that other lot if it can, you know, or something, I don't know. But it does, to me, I'm glad Mr. Fike brought that up because it does raise an important question, I think.
If the part of the site or part of the building ended up as office, we didn't do an analysis because we don't know the exact final square footage of the office space. That would have a higher demand of parking per our code than the transient rental use. So actually, more transient rental on the site would decrease the parking requirements. That's my understanding.
I have a question for staff related to this issue. If we were to approve 3 or 4 transient uses right now and on a conditional use permit, is that a forever permit or does that have to be renewed? Or do we have any control to revoke that if there were some future problem?
My understanding is that it becomes connected to the parcel, so it is in perpetuity, but you do have, you can remove it if there's something in there in the conditional uses. Do you
Yeah, there
remember?
is.
I'm almost
Off the top of my
positive
head.
that planning commission can revoke them if the property, if something like goes wrong in the property. And I think it's more, I can't remember what it says.
I can second Ms. Blair's point. I do recall there being a clause that there is able to be revoked, but I don't remember the specific
like what the
conditions.
are.
Okay. This is just relating to the concern that Mr. Fike expressed. And personally, I don't know that the lots have to be combined to address that. I think we could approve the use permit conditioned on the existing property, both lots remaining parking, available parking for this building and this usage, whether they're two lots or one lot. And I think that would resolve the issue of having, retaining control. And if they did something with the second lot other than parking for this usage that's being proposed, then I think we would have the ability to come back and say, wait a minute, this is a different usage. So, those are my personal thoughts. Anybody else that chooses to speak for or against? Okay. Any further questions from?
I kind of just, I'm still wanting a little bit of clarification on the parking. So let's just say four units. That's 4,500, right? The fourth unit is 1,500 square feet roughly, maybe? So 4,500 square feet of rental, transient rental, one spot per unit, correct? So that's four. And if there's 6,500 square feet and we take 1,500 out, that leaves 5,000 square feet for office space.
Correct.
What would the required parking be for that 5,000 square feet of office space? And is it met on the single lot or not? Because if it is, I don't think that it's appropriate that we force them to combine the lots if they can meet parking requirements on that space.
Off the top of my head, I do recall the office call out for parking being fairly minimal. I believe it's one spot for every 1,000 square feet. So in this instance, you would have 5 spots required, depending on how you were to call it out, and depending on what business is there. So that's why as a staff, we didn't give a direct number of parking requirements because it's all based on the use and type of business that's in the space per the code.
And there's 25 on that parcel, right? And
Yes, 25 of existing spaces with room to expand
That's on
quite
the
drastically.
lot facing Jackson Street. Or there's 25 on the lot
It's
that we're
25.
talking about.
The lot we're talking about, the
Okay.
L-shaped building, that has
So
25
we're
existing.
probably pretty good.
Yeah, staff felt that we were safe without an official call out. And like I had said, without the businesses being in place currently, we can't give a legitimate number.
We do get another stab at that too, because they have to apply for their transient rental permit. Assuming that you give them
Correct.
permission to run transient rental on this site, they have to apply for the transient rental permit, and show their parking plan as well.
Any further comments or questions from the commission? Anybody prepared to make a motion?
I guess I'll make one more comment since I
Okay.
didn't do one at the
Mr.
beginning.
Whalen.
I'm kind of on Mr. Zulof's side that if it's appropriate for part of the building, it may be appropriate for all. But I think Mr. Bajali and neighborhood concerns are legitimate. And really, it sounds like just the 4 units are probably what may end up being used anyways if he rents the space. So that would be where I would lean, is towards the option 3. If somebody were going to move to motion.
So is that just a comment or a motion?
That is a comment.
Okay. I'm going to step forward and make a motion to approve the application for the 4 transient rental units currently, and subject to the staff recommendations and conditions that go with the approval of 4 units currently, even though we understand that the applicant would not move forward immediately with the 4th unit.
You don't want that to be part of that motion, do you?
No, I'm just saying that that's the background. I mean, he could move forward with it right now if we approve it.
So what's the motion?
That we approve the application for a conditional use permit for up to 4 units,
So in other words,
subject to the staff conditions and requirements with that 4-unit usage.
By that, do you mean option 3?
Well, whatever that option is for 4 units, up to 4 units.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'll second that motion for option 3.
Okay. Any discussion now that it's been moved and seconded?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify, this is with the parking spaces as they were presented originally, not with any of the other discussion about combining parcels or maybe making a condition.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with the three, and we always talk about integrity of neighborhoods, and the reason people don't want to live in the city is because maybe there's too much rental, and tenants behaving badly, ruining neighborhoods, those kind of things. But I have no problem with the three. I would like to see the three approved and then wait on the fourth one, but I'll be voting no as the motion stands.
Just to respond, since we're in discussion,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the financial need for that fourth one. Now, again, they could come back, but if we're going to allow, my personal perception is if we allow three, I don't see a problem with four.
Yeah.
I do think there's plenty of parking
We get a
there,
second.
as the staff seems to indicate.
David.
I hear your concern about rentals, transient rentals. Everything I've seen so far, like in the Cove District, I've really, in a couple of years, have not heard complaints. And I hear more and more people, I actually own a house down there that
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that with, but in fact, I'm thinking about moving back there myself. So I think it's been a good experience, but in any event,
I'm not against transient rentals, and I'm not against the rental business at all, but I would just, I guess in this case, given the makeup of that neighborhood, I'd kind of like to err on the side of caution, that's all.
Okay. So, but we do have a motion made and seconded.
And we're in the discussion.
Yeah. Any more discussion?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with Mr. Pajali's concern about the neighborhood integrity and not having a negative impact, and that's why we do this deliberation, have these hearings. And I have to say, if it was on a quiet residential street, no way, I wouldn't even vote for any of them. But because it's Columbus Avenue and there are many other commercial enterprises on Columbus Avenue, and it's a fairly busy corner. It's not Monroe, but it's still Madison. It gets some traffic. It's an attractive commercial corner, and that's why we have a commercial property there. I'm not worried about the decision. However I vote won't be because I think that it's a negative impact on this particular neighborhood. I do agree that it's an important consideration and that we always should be cautious about the impact on people who are already there, who, when we change zoning, they bought one thing. We have to be very careful about pulling the rug out from under them.
Any further discussion? Mr. Miller?
Just to weigh in, I think I'm persuaded by the applicant and reassured by the controls that the Airbnb VRBO process offers in terms of regulation in dealing with renters that are not compliant with the requirements. And being transient rentals, these are not permanently rented by some scafflofts that would cause disruption to the neighborhood. If there's a group that brings in too many people or too loud, that's dealt with appropriately, apparently. And so that I'm not really concerned about the distinction between 3 units and 4 units. I don't have a problem were we to vote this down and say he has to come back for that 4th unit, but to me, it seems pretty clear that really shouldn't be an issue.
Any further discussion? I guess call the question.
Mr. McGorry?
Yes on the motion.
Mr. Miller?
Yes?
Mr. Zuloff?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Bajali?
No.
Okay, appears that it's passed. Congratulations, good luck. Yeah. All right, next matter of business on the agenda is old business. Sandusky or Sandusky, Inc. Submitted a similar main use application for at 709 F West Perkins Avenue. This matter was tabled at the last meeting, which I did not make for some personal reasons. So perhaps somebody could, I did read the minutes. We need to take it off the table, right? I guess, so somebody needs to make a motion.
Move to take it off the table?
Second.
Second on that motion? To take it off the table?
Mr. Zuloff?
Mike said second.
I
Mike
did second. That was seconded.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, all in favor of taking it off the table?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, so it's off the table, open for discussion. Is the applicant here on that? Or what I'd like to do is first, especially since I was not at the last meeting, maybe have staff make any comments or re-educate all of us, even though everybody else knows more about it than I. I did read the minutes, though.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can give just a brief summary, and we can
Okay.
move on to the topic of discussion. So the site's located at 709 West Perkins Avenue, Unit F. It's zoned for general business. The adjacent zoning is public facilities to the north, which is the Sandusky School District property. Down to the east, commercial service and general business. The west is general business, and to the south is Perkins Township, but it's zoned for commercial and industry. The existing use of this site is a pawn shop or slash retail. And the proposed use is still going to be pawn shop, but they would like to add the sale of firearms to their items of sale and pawning and buying. So the site currently shares the parcel with other businesses. The store total is about 5,367 square feet. Operates as a pawn shop, and the operation is within a federally defined school zone, which I'll mention on in a few minutes here. Currently, the zoning does not specifically permit the sale of firearms or similar uses in general business district, but general business does allow permitted uses in local business districts, and local business calls sporting goods as a similar item that could be potentially viable for this application. Staff feels that sporting goods and firearms could be interpreted as a similar use. So here is an image. It's 135 feet away from Sandusky City Schools property, and you can see it's pretty much surrounded by the property as well. But one thing to note.
Chairman, if I could interrupt and ask the staff to, as you go through this, highlight any changes to the report, because it is an amended report, is that right? So could you, when you come to an amendment, could you, because I don't remember the 135 feet, for example.
I was going to ask the same thing.
Yeah, so after further analysis, and thank you for bringing that up, we added some supplemental facts that's being included based on based on the table in a last month's meeting of this topic. It was asked that we had more information for the commission, so this is part of what we're presenting from, further analysis for you guys. So the property to the left picture here is surrounded by the blue, and it has access that does not go through what is now Sandusky City School District. And so we made a quick facts slide for you guys and for everyone in the audience.
Is this new information to the report?
This is new information, correct?
Thank you, yeah.
It's
Yep.
reiterating some things we covered last time. So a big part of the conversations was centering around like, wait, what are they allowed to do what's the facts of the case? What are they allowed to do with federal law, with Ohio law? And that's not what is on the table for y'all to be deciding, but it was supplemental information. So there's kind of confusion about, like, are they even allowed to sell firearms this close to a school? How does that work? How close is this? So the school zone is defined as like 1,000 feet away, which is well beyond the distance of the property, obviously, as you saw, is 135 feet. So we wanted to show you that distance and measure it. And then will you go back to the ATF guidelines? And sorry, I won't take over your whole presentation.
No, you're fine.
So the Chief Oliver had instructed us in our initial staff report that he was comfortable with the firearms that's being sold here as long as they're in strict compliance with the ATF laws. The applicant came last time and talked about what those laws are in more detail and how the guns have to be locked or in a case, and that they have like really strict training on how it's done, et cetera. So we just wanted to provide that on a slide so you all had it at your disposal, that the Ohio law does, it regulates firearms in the school zone, but it does not prohibit firearms dealing, operating within a school zone, that it is federally legal, as long as they're following all those requirements. And that was kind of the statements of fact as supplemental information.
So, other than the requirements from ATF for the sale of firearms, those requirements apply to everybody. Correct me if I'm wrong, there's no limitation or restriction on being close to a school that would prevent this.
Not through federal Ohio law. So what we've got at the table is our local zoning law. Because it's not spelled out in the zoning, we'd have to evaluate it with the similar main use evaluation points, which, will you go to that blue highlighted slide? So this is where the conversation mostly centered around last time, was like, how do we say if this is a similar main use? And the code gives us 4 points. So the first one is that.
Mr. Chairman, before we get to the similar main use part, could you go back to the prior screen? Couple things. Part of the important part of the discussion last month was whether the issue was 1,000 feet from a school building or the school grounds. This document says 1,000 feet from the grounds.
Yeah, so a school
Even
zone-
though it is within 1,000 feet, the site's also within 1,000 feet of the building, but the law is school grounds.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
just-
Mr. Oaks was instructed by someone on a phone call that because the buildings themselves were 500 feet apart, they were fine. And we couldn't find any documentation that supported that. Like, he was told on the phone, oh yeah, they're fine, it's 500 feet. So the last report you got showed that 500 feet from building to building. And part of our discussion was like, wait, what about the property line? The school zone definition is 1,000 feet from the property line.
And so we have an answer now that we didn't have before.
Yes.
The 1,000 feet is about the distance from the school property, not from the
That's
school building
several
property.
blocks. Yeah,
Thank you.
that'd be several blocks.
And just to clarify, the way I understand it is that it's not that sales are prohibited, it's that there are different requirements when you are within 1,000 feet
Correct.
of the school grounds
Correct.
for handling the firearms. So
Correct.
because this site is within 1,000 feet of a school property, customers must handle those weapons differently. They must be locked in a container, or they're in violation of federal law, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's a different, were this site 1,000 feet away, it would be a different set of handling rules. That was, I know we had a lot of questions about that last month, so that's why I'm highlighting that.
Thank you.
What you haven't answered is the question that was raised regarding concealed carry. An Ohio CCW would exempt you from this handling requirement, and I'm guessing not. But I don't know, that's not clear here.
I can tell you, I went on a very circuitous and long rabbit hole on concealed carry law, which points you, like, you read something and that points you back to like another item and another
Sure.
item and another item. And
Complicated law.
what I found, so it's in the report on page 8, the Ohio Revised Code, it's like 2923.126, 2923.122, and 2923.126. within a school zone, concealed carry permit holders can carry in select establishments. So if a private establishment does not say they cannot, if the private owner allows people with concealed carry in, they can go in. They may not set foot on school grounds.
Okay.
But they could be next door. If the establishment allowed them, they could be next door.
Okay,
with
so one more quick
concealed-
question on this subject. Is this your graphic, or did this come verbatim from another source, or is this
ATF
your?
quick facts.
Correct, yeah.
We
Okay.
made this slide, but we pulled that directly from the ATF. thing.
Okay, so the school zone, because Ohio Revised Code says school safety zone, is that the same meaning here, school zone?
The school zone, I believe Ohio law is pulling from ATF, and maybe they're,
Ohio Revised Code uses the term,
is there somebody on the Teams call?
Brian did. I just muted him.
Okay.
Ohio Revised Code uses the term school safety zone. Is that what we mean here when we say school zone?
My understanding is that they are the same thing, and that's the 1,000 feet from a school grounds.
Okay, that didn't answer the question. When we say school zone here, do we mean school safety zone per the
I believe that that's what
ORC? Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then the only other comment I had, Mr. Chairman, is that Mr. Murray implored us last time, which I don't think showed up in the minutes, to stick to our sandbox and rule on the question of zoning code and not rule based on our interpretation of federal and state law, that's not our sandbox. So that was his comment. I think, I'm not sure that, this is a deliberative decision, and you're free to consider whatever you want, but my stated reason for my vote will be how I interpret our zoning code and what it says, and not about my opinion on the firearms laws.
To that point, do you want to go to, are you?
It won't let me click
It's
over.
not going to let you click.
So I might have to go up here.
So the code gives us those 4 points of how to evaluate a similar main use. And the conversation, so I have them highlighted on that blue slide. I'll put this there, and thank you, Alec, appreciate it.
There you go.
So it asks that you evaluate based on all of the allowed uses in the entire, like every single use allowed, is it similar in like dangers to the health and safety, creating offensive noise, vibration, dust, heat, smoke, odor, glare, or other objectionable influences to an extent greater than normal or resulting from those uses listed. And that was one phrase that I heard Commissioner Castile mention, is that, can a firearm be interpreted as an objectionable influence to an extent greater than normally resulting from the other uses listed? So that was kind of what we focused on in the analysis. The other ones didn't come up as much, items B, C, and D. But they're all highlighted here. And something that I think is interesting to think about is, that are they undue, greater than normal? So this zoning district allows assembly and meeting halls, billiard halls, bowling alleys, which would have a lot of strangers, right? People moving in and out of those spaces. It allows railroad and bus passenger stations, which is a lot of, random people moving in and out. Or do they pose any more or less danger to a child than a person who wants to, pawn their dad's shotgun for a couple $100s? I don't know. I'm not like, so that is just, we're just trying to think like how I was trying to get to a point where we're helping you make that determination, that if those hotels, motels, and social clubs allowed concealed carry, there could be people in there in the zoning district today carrying weapons in this area just as close to the school building if they had concealed carry permits. There's the consumption of beer and wine, so there can be highly intoxicated people near the school zone, or in the school zone. And so we started with, the last report was all about like, is this a sporting and athletic good? And is that how we evaluate the similar domain use? And for this one, we just kind of stepped back with that, is it more dangerous than the other uses question in mind, and started thinking about like, well, how dangerous could we, when, if we scenario model out, how dangerous are these other uses that are allowed right next door?
So does that summarize all the changes
I think so,
to the
Alex, yeah.
report then?
Yeah, that summarizes everything.
So we maintain the recommendation to approve because we're following Chief Oliver's lead on that, and he was fine with it as long as they're following ATF
Said
guidelines.
Mr. Miller has a question.
You leave up the blue highlighted line.
Mr. Miller, you have a question?
No, I have
If I may.
a comment.
If I may continue the recommendation, the staff recommendation, the conditions are the same as last meeting, but I'm going to go ahead and reiterate. So we approve the similar main use at this address with, as long as all applicable permits are obtained to the building, engineering, and planning departments. As Ms. Blair had said, all ATF guidelines of purchase and sale are properly followed, and then also that no ammo is to be sold at this location without further analysis, and that was a comment from the fire marshal.
Okay, Mr. Miller, you have a comment?
Yes. Because you missed the last meeting, I'll give you my interpretation from my perspective, what I saw happening or felt was happening. And this is giving a little explanation of my personal perspective going into it. I'm not against guns, but I think that guns in the city of Sandusky have been a problem. And I think that was kind of the elephant in the room that was behind at least my perspective when this application was initially received. I kind of struck upon looking for a reason, a legitimate way to deny the application. And when I hit upon the 500 feet or 1,000 feet from school property, I thought clearly this business is a lot closer to the parking lot and to the athletic fields. And so I wanted clarification of what the ATF regulation really required. And I think the amended staff report really addressed that concern of mine. And after reading that amended report, I am now of the opinion that I don't really have a legitimate reason to deny this request. Things I wanted to cling to, the distance from the property, is it too noisy or disruptive or whatever? Probably not. Is it legitimately considered a sporting good? I wanted to kind of cling to that. Well, probably the most general interpretation, sporting goods include guns in Ohio. Just, that's what it is, in my opinion. So after getting clarification of my initial questions, what does it mean to be a school zone? What is the distance required? Now it's my opinion that I don't have a legitimate reason to deny this. When the person representing the company spoke to us, he represented, I think fairly and accurately, what the ATF requirements are now that they have been presented in response to the questions that we asked. And so I want to again go back to distinguishing where I started in the beginning. Yeah, Sandusky has a gun problem, and saying that you can't transact guns at a pawn shop probably isn't gonna affect that. That if there isn't a legitimate, safe way to transact them where there's no ammunition available, that they have to be locked, that, to me, this is a very closely regulated sale as compared to in the absence of this being available, that somebody's gonna sell grandpa's shotgun in a private transaction rather than pawn it. which is a worse situation to be in. So I don't want to be it's not guns that kill people, it's people who kill people. It's more that a regulated, safe sale, control of guns is better than unregulated sale of guns. So I'm ready to accept the staff report and support the.
Would you care to make a motion to that effect?
And
I begrudgingly.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we've had one speech, and you're inviting a motion.
Well, there's going to be discussion after that. You want to have more discussion before somebody makes a motion? Go ahead.
I have a question on that matter. What happens if nobody does make a motion?
I'm sorry, what happens?
What happens if nobody does make a motion?
There will be a
You
motion.
have to make a motion?
There will be a motion.
Somebody has to.
Yeah, we have to rule on it. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The point that it's a similar main use, that is defensible, but it's not the strongest construct here. Look, automobile racing is a sport. That doesn't make an automobile dealer a sporting goods dealer, okay? Calling a gun store or weapons sales sporting goods is a little tortured. It's more defensible to say, no, it's in a class by itself. It's not your ordinary sporting goods stores, not your ordinary sporting goods. Everyone knows that most people buying handguns, and that's what they're talking about here mostly, but most people buying, most of the sales today are claimed to be for defense, and although many are for sporting purposes, hunting and that sort of thing. So this is really arguably in a second, and I'm not invalidating the argument that it's a sporting, that it's similar because it's a sporting goods. I'm saying that it's equally valid at least, or maybe stronger argument that it's in a class by itself and it's not a sporting good. I dispute the idea that you have no choice but to vote for it because we aren't armed with a rational argument against this application. I think it's clear right there in our face. It's calling it a sporting good is and that's why we have to. I reject that. It's equally defensible to say this is not an ordinary sporting goods. And I'm not going to argue of the insanity of voting in favor of gun sales 135 feet from a high school grounds. I'm going to argue that it doesn't fit the code, in my opinion, and there's no way I can vote for this.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment, just piggyback.
Castillo, go ahead.
Thank you. Just piggybacking off of Mike, I also would venture to say that it's a stretch to say that pawn shop selling firearms is a sporting goods. I don't feel that should be categorized that way based on our code, and getting away from what I brought up in the first meeting about it, which you pointed out, Ms. Blair, about the safety and the danger. That was the initial shock of, wait, we're even considering firearms that close to a school. Looking at the code in more detail and everything else, I agree. Like you said, what is it more of a danger than any other situation where people have a CCW and they're walking around? So that's a fair argument, but again, like Mike said, I think it's a bit of a stretch to say it's a sporting goods situation.
Can I clarify to both of those comments? We definitely didn't consider it a sporting good. Otherwise, we would have just approved the application when it came in the door. So we were looking at is that it is kind of a class in itself, which is why we brought it to you and told the applicant the only way they could get approved to do this at this location was to get the similar main use approval. And so that's why we kind of took that higher level approach, that it's not, we're not trying to say like, is this or a sporting good or is it not? We're trying to, the similar main use, these kind of items A through D is, does this is this going to create an objectionable influence to an extent greater than normally resulting from the other uses listed in the district? That's really what's on the table. Not, is it close enough to a sporting good to be approvable? Will it be more objectionable than the other uses? That's the evaluation on the table.
So,
My follow-up question to those comments then is objectionable to whom? To us, to neighbors, to people who feel there's a gun?
To the danger, to the
Problem in
health and
this
safety
country.
of the public. That's everything that's in item
Yeah.
A. Will it, if you interpret that it creates dangers to the health and safety of the public to an influence greater than the extent normally resulted from the other uses listed in the district, that's your defensible argument against this application strictly using the language of our zoning code.
Okay, I would like to make a comment now, even though we're not in discussion, but Mr. Miller indicated that I think, to paraphrase his words there, that Sandusky has a gun problem, or there's a gun problem in the city. I think there's a gun problem in the country. I think
Thank you.
that the proliferation of guns in this country, and I understand the constitutional amendment, the right to bear arms, but I still think, for a developed country, we have more problems with guns than percentage-wise per capita than any place. But do I personally believe that by approving this, I don't have a good gut feeling about approving this, but do I think that if we approve this, that's going to make the city or that parking lot or the Sandusky City School that's there, is that going to be more dangerous than it exists already? I personally believe that anybody that trades or buys a gun there, if they don't get it there, they can get it someplace else. So I have a hard time saying that it's going to be causing more of a problem at that location. And as far as the issue of sporting versus non-sporting, some people that want a gun, they go out and shoot, and it's all the time. They go to ranges, and even with pistols, and you don't have to be a hunter for it to be a sport. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. There are people that go to target shooting all the time. We have pistol and rifle matches over at Camp Perry every summer. So I don't like the proliferation of guns in this country. I don't like the proliferation of guns but I don't think we're going to stop it. And I don't think we're going to stop it by voting no on this application. Do I personally wish that application was never made? Yes. Would I prefer that guns not be sold there? Yes. And it's because this is a particular zoned district. If this was zoned where guns could be sold without an application, we wouldn't have any control over it. Is that correct?
Is there firearms listed anywhere else? I know there's explosives listed at some point, but I don't think firearms themselves.
Yeah, firearms is never
are
mentioned.
mentioned in the code. So we didn't even have another district to compare it to. They're just.
Well, but what I'm saying is like Walmart sells firearms.
No, not anymore.
They don't?
They quit.
Well,
Any
that was-
sporting, other
but
sporting.
that was their in-house decision. They were
All right,
in an
you
area.
you just made a statement that Walmart sells guns. The fact is, Sandusky Walmart does not sell guns anymore. They sell air rifles, and that's it.
But they did
Other
at one
sport-
time. My
and-
point is that they were in some kind of a
Okay.
district that was allowed to sell guns.
Oh, I see.
That was my point. And, when. we
Nowhere
had-
near a school, though.
Well, no, but that's not a prohibition, because as long as, and the conditions, these firearms would have to be locked leaving. And so the question is, in my opinion, do we philosophically vote no? Or do we say a no vote isn't going to change anything in the world? It's not prohibited by the 1,000 feet from a school zone. It just requires, as you pointed out, that there's some conditions when you leave with a gun. It has to be in a locked case or locked up, and the staff is recommending no ammunition. Now, again, I don't know what you can do with a gun that's going to be harmful except hit somebody over the head if you don't leave there with ammunition. But yes, you can go someplace else and buy ammunition and come back. So, again, I don't like the idea, but I don't see, I see there's legitimate reasons to approve this. Do I like it? That's my observation. No, I don't like it, but I think there's legitimate reasons to approve it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Bajali.
Given all the checks and balances that Mr. Miller pointed out, and the fact that they do have to go through an application process, just like everywhere else, I'm not an expert on guns, and I wouldn't pretend to be, but if the police chief doesn't have a problem with it, he is an expert on guns and crime. So I'm going to defer to his opinion, given the fact that he said they have to follow those ATF regulations. I guess my only question is, well, two questions. If it's legal, zoning-wise, I mean, that's what we should be looking at. And number two, the ATF regulations. So many times government puts in these regulations. Does anybody ever enforce those, or does anybody ever come and look to see if they're following those? You probably don't have the answer, but that would be my only question. I mean, if the police chief doesn't have an issue with it, then certainly I'm not going to override what the police chief thinks. That's my only comment.
So, Mr. Chairman, to make a point of order, you were correct. We shouldn't be discussing this until we have a motion, so.
Oh, even though you complained. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Ironically, we've all had our chance to ask questions.
All right. Would anybody care to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation? I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the application per the staff conditions and requirements, one of which would be that all ATF rules and regulations be followed, which would include the exceptions applicable under the school zone limitations, which would be that the firearms need to be locked and when they're being transported away, and also the staff condition that no ammunition be sold on the premises. Is there anything further that needs to be stated in there?
Just the permitting side, so the building, engineering, and any additional.
No, this is the motion.
That was another condition.
No, but I'm saying
How much do you want to include in that motion?
I want to include all the staff conditions.
So that was condition number one.
That's all you have to say.
Okay.
We don't have to enumerate.
Okay.
I'm not ruling, I'm just
No,
trying to help here.
that's fine, thank you. I appreciate that.
Is that a motion?
I guess,
Was there a
No
second?
discussion. There's been moved.
Was there a second?
Mr. Miller said.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
so on discussion, I just, before we vote, want to say that this is one that's been tough. You know, sometimes being on these boards is not a fun thing to do. I think there's 100 other better places to have a pawn shop that sells guns, and I wish that one of those were applying for this, but we have this one here in front of us today, and sometimes you have to vote for things that you do not want to see happen, because that's what we're here to approve based on this.
Yeah.
I'm probably on that
Any
side.
further discussion?
I still think it creates a danger that's outside of what would normally be presented. So I am voting within the code as well, and not philosophically, just for the public record.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
I
understand
didn't,
what you
yeah.
said.
I said, I still think that approving this would create a danger outside of what would normally be present. So I'm not voting just based off of my morals. I'm
Thank you.
also voting based on the code.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think anybody, and I don't want to speak for anybody around the table, but I don't think anybody feels good about the fact that they're going to be selling guns at that location. But we have to look at it just on the zoning aspect, and that's the way I'll be voting too.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we suspend the debate and vote, otherwise known as calling the question.
Yes, I will request that the question be called.
Well, formally, yeah, I suppose, hearing no objection, yeah, okay.
Everybody's had a chance to speak already, so,
Okay, Mr. McGorry,
yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Zuloff,
No.
Mr. Whalen,
Yes.
Ms. Castile,
No.
Mr. Pajali,
Yes.
So 4-2. I don't think we have to say anything further on that, other than that's the vote.
Motion passed.
Yeah.
Yep, passes. Great.
Okay, we still have some more on the agenda, and that's a discussion on transient rentals regulation.
we have one more.
Yeah, we have one more application.
No, the cross
I'm sorry, what?
bay.
I guess maybe
First Street?
on the one that we printed out earlier this week, I don't have anything. What's,
It's also
1231
listed under
First
old
Street.
business.
Crossview Bay,
Here.
oh, I'm sorry, I do have that, yeah. All right, I got it. I'm sorry, I'm looking past that.
Mr. Chairman, a question about the agenda here. There was also prior discussion regarding food retailers. I wondered if that has, is there more to come on that? And also, hopefully, what are we discussing here? I mean, we've really beaten this one to death. Are we proposing any changes to the ordinance, or why are,
Could we handle
We're
the
not at
next
that
matter
item.
on the agenda, which I skipped over, the Cross Bay
Yeah.
application?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought you were on the.
Well, I was, but it was pointed out that there was.
Thank you,
enough-
sorry.
yeah. So the next matter on the actual agenda is the Cross Bay LTD site plan application for 1231 First Street. Again, I've read the minutes from the last meeting, but I wasn't here, so I'd like staff to explain that a little bit.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will once again give a brief summary. This was here for a pre-analysis, more or less, in the last meeting, and now they officially applied for this site plan. The site's located at 1231 First Street. It's currently zoned for commercial recreation. The north is the bay, so no zoning to the north. To the east is commercial recreation. The west is general business, single-family residential, and commercial recreation. The south is residential business and also commercial recreation. It's currently used as a marina and storage facility. Most of the lot is vacant currently. The proposed use is to add transient occupancy / RV park, continue the marina usage, and then also the storage usage. The site is 19 acres. The total building coverage 12%. And there's 5 parcels currently on this site. One parcel has commercial structure, 3 parcels are undeveloped, and one other parcel is the marina and dockage. And the existing commercial structure totals roughly 93,600 square feet, and the current building is 25 feet tall. The applicant wishes to develop the parcel into a luxury recreational vehicle park as an amenity to the marina facilities currently in operation. Sites are expected to be available to rent to customers other than marina users through Airbnb or other means. The proposed RV park is designed for the public to bring their own RVs, but some sites are going to be expected to have owner-provided in quotes, movable structures available for transient rental. Tent camping won't be permitted in this proposal. Marina staff will operate during park hours and daytime hours with one on-site resident manager for overnight hours. The proposed park will be 24 hours a day with a quiet time from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. respectively. The RV camping is anticipated to only be seasonal, which is roughly April through October, and the marina is expected to be year-round because of boat storage and maintenance. So the proposal in front of you, didn't they reduce this from 50 to, or is it 50? Okay.
We have that on the summary bullet points.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think it's 50 now.
it is 50, I believe it was 56. So originally they had 56 or 57 RV sites, but now they reduced it to 50, which I'll confirm once we get to that bullet point. But so there'll also be space for cars and RVs, a bathhouse, an outdoor pool. There'll be roughly 85 off-street parking spaces if you include the 50 RV sites. I think over half of these have 2 parking areas and the other half have only 1, so that's how we determine that number. The paved coverage from this is 152,000 square feet. Currently in the addition with all this concrete and asphalt will be 66,000 square feet additional coverage. Let me see if we get to, so the proposed lighting for this site was one of the comments we'll also hit on, but that is the proposed structure per each RV site with a downlighting design. And the only other thing, this site that I didn't mention is there are going to be some like accommodation areas in the southwest corner, like some swings, just for the users. So this is what was changed from the last meeting based on commission comments and staff comments. They have updated their landscape plan, and I'll kind of bounce back and forth here. As you can see here, they did put a residential buffer on the southeast side, which was originally proposed to have 7 more spaces, so they are accommodating for residential uses being close. The dumpster location is called out on the north side of the orange-ish rectangle. That's where the trash location will be. The traffic flow is called out in the plan here, so that was an engineering concern. And then once again, they removed 7 RV sites to accommodate the setback recommendations by staff and I believe the commission. The topography and preliminary stormwater plan is now attached to this. Here, they show the slopes, they show the grading plan of where the water's gonna drain to. The lighting specifications have been met, parking details have been met, and they did expand the entry drive shoulder at First Street. I believe they widened it, is that correct, Ms.
They
Blair?
widened it and broadened the turning radius based on then city engineer comments to make sure that trailers, you know, with a boat and with an RV could make that turn coming in off of First Street, so they widened the gateway there at the beginning. I also wanted to mention, we received another communication from the applicant since they turned in this site plan. They've been in close conversation with us about the future Sandusky Bay pathway coming through the site. And this is from the applicant, we can include this, but it says, "We are committed to preserving an area for the bike path to cross our property in the relative location that's currently on the plan. We realize that having the 3 crossings through the bike path is not feasible either for the city or for us. We would have to gate each access drive, which is not that practical. Our intention is to have vehicular access across the path only at the main gate with a secondary crossing at the very east end of the property, but that will really be only for emergencies like fire or the very occasional boat or equipment delivery that cannot travel through the main entrance. Note that we do plan to have the main gate along the pathway so that our guests can enter and exit the pathway. Locations for more than one, man gate, pedestrian gate, will likely be determined at a later time." So the summary of that is that their main, the main entrance coming in that's shown on the site plan, they're gonna keep that, but they're planning to eliminate the other 2 dark gray crossings and keep, so the area of the sites that's closer to First Street would circulate within itself, and the area on the other side of where the pathway would come through would circulate within itself. So they're decreasing that kind of like the crossing of the pathway from 3 to 1, which will decrease the amount of pedestrian bicycle conflict. We think that'll add a lot of value to the pathway going through there. They'll have pedestrian access to the pathway. So they see the pathway as an amenity, and they're committed to making, helping that come through the site. And we think that it's a great improvement to only have one place where vehicles and boat traffic will cross the pathway. So that's an update since they submitted this site plan.
And Ms. Blair, if I may add to that, the southeastern corner, that turnaround area, the applicant had mentioned just for accessibility concerns that they might remove another RV site, so 50, maybe 49, and maybe 48, depending on what the final presentation would be, which, we're unaware of as of right now, but the future sites definitely, based on what engineering comments we have gathered from this email, it would probably be closer to 48, 49, not 50 sites.
My understanding that their ask is that you would approve the 50, knowing that they might reduce one or two, and that you would approve the site plan here with the comment on the record that they would reduce the 3 crossings to 1.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zuloff.
I think this amended site plan is beyond expectations and responsive to the Commission's comments last month. And I would like to make the motion to approve the application subject to the condition on the staff's report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We're into discussion. I have a couple questions for staff, especially since I wasn't at the last meeting. So this is an application submitted for site plan approval. So does this usage meet all zoning requirements? In other words, this is an approved usage under the existing zoning?
That's correct. The applicant applied for a similar main use last meeting, which was the 22nd of December, 2021, and it was approved for a similar main use at this site in comparison to hotels and transient use. So this was the phase 2, which was the site plan after that approval.
And so a similar main usage, what's the zoning to begin with?
It's commercial recreation.
Okay.
And since RV park wasn't specified in the zoning, we instructed them to do the similar main use application. So that's what the commission voted on last meeting, was that planning commission voted to approve the similar main use so they could operate the RV park on the site. And then we had a preliminary site plan discussion with the first draft of their site plan, and now you've got the site plan in front of you. So it is an approved use based on that finding.
And is there any concern about, there's RVs of all sizes, and I've seen some huge, like a Greyhound bus size. Is there concern about the traffic going down First Street? Has that been discussed at all? If one of those is also pulling a boat?
That was discussed at length with the city engineer, Mr. Snyder. And that's one thing that I mentioned, and that Kula mentioned in the letter that I read, was they own the parcel. It's kind of like, you can see the dotted line, just the very top corner of this screen. They own a space where they can take in larger boats, or if somebody had an RV and a boat, I don't know if you could, I guess if you were driving an RV, you could be pulling a boat. So if they had really large ones that needed to go through, they could get there. There's large fire access there. And then the entrance was widened, and the shoulder radius, the turning radius was softened on First Street to accommodate the turning radius of vehicles too.
Okay.
I think the pull-through sites their site design will allow for the different sizes of RVs on their site.
And just an observation, again, I'm in favor generally of the concept of transient rental. This is a form of transient rental. The other side of the coin is, I see the way the site plan has been developed. I'm looking at the existing building, and it appears generally there's about the same width on each side of the building, but I'm noting that the RVs are going to be parked closer to the residential lots to the west there along First Street. Now, I realize that to the front on First Street, there's also some residential lots. So there's residential lots on both sides. I think if I lived in one of those residential lots immediately to the west, now I realize there's some green bufferage there, and hopefully that will be satisfactory. But if I lived there, I think I'd prefer the RVs on the other side of the existing building and parking on this side rather than the way it is. But just my personal observation.
Mr. Chairman, maybe it would help you to, I happened to bring last month's
Okay,
more preliminary plan, and you'll see
okay.
these were, what they've done is they've removed all these and created a buffer, which I think we should be very happy about.
Okay. Okay, so, refresh my memory, we're into the discussion phase. It's already been moved and seconded.
There's a
Any
motion,
further,
second.
any further discussion?
I would like to make a comment that in reading this application, my primary concern was not really addressed until Ms. Blair mentioned their concern about the pathway going through there. And I'm very, very pleased with their acknowledgement of it, their acceptance of it or embrace of it, and to remove 2 out of 3 conflicts in crossing that. I think that's, as good as we could hope, really, in accommodating the pathway, which is near and dear to me.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I think this is going to be a good project. I like the fact that they're going to have a resident manager on site, to kind of keep an eye on things. And they're also going to have a quiet time from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., which I think will help keep things under control. So I think it's going to be a good project. And I think the developer always does a nice job when they enter into a project.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I guess we'll call the question.
Mr. McGrory?
Yes?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Zuloff?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, now we're on the next item of the agenda, discussion on transient rentals regulation. We want to move forward with that, or?
That's up to you all. So I prepared a brief for you in November. There's been changes since local business. We've realized that local business can allow transient rental on a conditional use permit. We can kind of leave it alone for now if you wouldn't do that. I mean, we do know, we did have a member of the public who was hoping to speak on this topic, so I think it'd be great to invite her up at some point. I don't know if that's something you're allowed to do.
I would. I think
Okay.
she's here, and
Yeah.
so I would ask that she be allowed to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We hear about this all the time. People call us all the time wanting to do more transient rental in the city. They're very interested. I hear it from people that own a boat and they own a house because they're here some weekends and they'd love to be able to rent their house out other weekends. I hear it from, small business entrepreneurs that own 5 or 7 or 8 rental properties in the city. For people that own multifamilies, maybe they live in a duplex, so they live in one side, they'd like to do on the other side. There's interest all over the city in all of our residential areas. I've talked to planning commissioners in other cities. I've talked to Traverse City and another commissioner in a township outside of Traverse City. I've talked to Huron. I've done a ton of research on this, and nobody has like the perfect answer. I think that the bare minimum of best practices that have been established from the research I found, we're already doing. Meaning we have a way that our operators are registering with us, so we can take away their right to do that, to operate if they're not following the rules, if they have problem properties. So we're able to, take as much tax income that we can get from transient rental. I think that the biggest, what it comes down to is like allowing it takes up residential property and can affect affordable housing. Not allowing it, we're not or limiting it really tightly, then we're not allowing that the economic development opportunity of that use, that people want to be here to visit the city, which could lead to population growth. It could lead to local entrepreneurs making money. Also, it could lead to people from California buying up a bunch of our housing and operating it as transient rental, because you can make, the average that I found from the research I did is that the average monthly income on transient rental is $3,500 a month on a property in Sandusky. And the average rents, I think, are somewhere like maybe $500, $750 a month. I mean, it's a huge difference. So we know, and Ms. Rajali, I think we could talk about this, offline too, because we've had a bunch of conversations about this over the year. We have a couple property owners that have formally come to the commission and petitioned to add a transient rental zoning overlay district on their property. We had public meetings about that. We had a summary of the findings about the public meetings. And, the two of them have come formally to this body and asked, will you create a new transient rental overlay district for my property? They have support from their immediate surrounding neighbors. And the last thing that I heard, the last direction I heard was in November, I heard, show me a menu of options. What's the menu of options of how we can regulate transient rental in the city? And that's kind of what the report I prepared was, a list of what I found in that research of how people are regulating this. I think one of the simplest ones that's out there is a maximum number. If we wanted to allow this to kind of pepper around our residential neighborhoods, maybe we throw out a maximum number of permits that are available. We do have transient rental overlay. We have transient rental that's allowed in 7 of our zoning districts. We could leave it at that and say it's not allowed in any residential districts, period.
Well, that wouldn't be consistent with the code. I mean,
let
me clarify what I'm saying here. We have a code. It's
Yes.
not like we're not faced with a requirement to do something here. We have a code. It, in my opinion, was carefully written with much deliberation. You can point to where it has worked according to the intent and the expectations of the people who approved it and had input into it. What it hasn't done is allowed easy, willy-nilly spot overlays. That may be pretty wise. So let's not go in with the presumption that there's something to fix here. We have evidence that it works because we have successful districts. We have evidence that the bar is kind of high because we haven't jumped every time somebody says, hey, can I do mine? We've appropriately protected the neighbors. So we've had, this subject has come up over and over, and at some point we got to say, look, we've been there. Maybe it's just fine the way it is.
I'm curious, you say you've spoken with Huron, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do as far as the city at large? I mean, do they allow it
have a
everywhere?
maximum number of permits available for their residential districts, so I think it's 165.
Spread throughout the whole
Spread throughout all their
Was it
residential
first come, first served?
It's first come, first served.
So no rhyme or reason to it other than I heard about it first.
And it's allowing it, and
I think
I
ours
think
is
they had
better.
120. So ours, something I find interesting about ours is that it deliberately concentrates them into an overlay district, and their approach allows them to organically spread. And I think it just depends. Do you believe that it disrupts neighborhoods if there's too many of them? Does
Do
it
you know how
fundamentally
many
change a neighborhood?
approximately of those permits are already in use?
120 some is what.
So there's like 40 to
plan.
go, and it's like a membership cap. I mean, if they get to 100 and whatever it is, they could say, okay, now we're going to add another 50.
Good, yeah. And I don't know what they'll do. Traverse City, Michigan has a really complicated number of regulations that they do. They have some districts where a specific percentage of a building is allowed to be transient occupancy. So in this district, 25%, in this district, 100%. They have developers building like 70-unit apartment buildings just for transient rental right now. I mean, it's just a huge, there's a huge demand in the industry right now, so we hear about it all the time.
And Traverse City is available throughout the entire city.
It is not allowed in any of their residential districts. They have very limited residential housing stock in Traverse
Okay.
City, so they have more available commercial places. A lot of their residential, they became more of a small city that like people went out and built around in the suburbs, as opposed to Sandusky where we have a lot of really dense housing.
Okay.
If you go to Traverse City, and they have these charming little residential neighborhoods that are like neat as a pin. It's really kind of neat, and there are not that many of them because an awful lot, well, of course, the city, I don't think the city limits isn't that big, right?
Yes.
And then an awful lot of the county residents live, farmettes and spread out. And, the town is probably real comparable in scale to Sandusky. Maybe the downtown area is a little bigger.
A little bigger, yeah, but it's very similar. I think it's a good peer city to kind of look to. They get a lot more tourism traffic than we do, but I think we're probably on the road to becoming that popular.
I think
It's
their
great.
population quadruples during the Cherry Festival, maybe more, I don't know.
So like the kind of the summary at the end page of the brief I prepared for you is like the options on the table. Leave it alone, don't do anything different right now. Updating the local business, which we can kind of say, okay, check, we're done, that issue solved. Unless you wanted to just open it up completely to transient rental in local business district and not do conditional use. But I don't know if I see a compelling reason to kind of pursue a code change for that, unless you felt really strongly about it. And another option is, consider adding another transient rental overlay district or two, or other option for additional transient rental overlay district, or another metric of regulation in addition to what we already have, in addition to the transient rental.
Well, and with the current code, at any time, this body could propose a district.
At any time, the planning commission can propose.
So we have that in the code. If there is a district we want to create, we can.
Can I ask a related question? I have a comment that I was going to make at some point about, because Mr. Bajali is new. So I've talked about, it bothers me that residents have no way to activate and actually move forward with ideas that they have. Really, their only course of action right now is to talk to you guys or to talk to one of us and get us to do something, right? And so we've got people that came to us, it's been 7 months now,
Over a
8
year.
months?
Mr. Maldonado, I think.
It's been a while, and we haven't acted. What I would like to do, and the way it's related is, could we, or would this be an ordinance change that the commission would need to make? Could we make a rule that if, let's say, 20% of any given area wanted that area, that lived in that area, wanted that area to be transient, it would come to us?
It wouldn't even have to be.
It would be up to us to create our own standard
Right.
for what we're going to approve and what we're not going to approve. But at least, I don't like that residents all over the city are wanting to do this and they're just kind of, well, we got to wait on, we either got to convince the planning staff that it's a good idea, or we got to convince the planning commissioner that it's a good idea because they have no way to activate it on their own otherwise.
Well, I think that's probably deliberate and not terribly unwise that the people have the right to petition the government, right? They can ask. Doesn't mean that the elected officials or the appointed officials have to do whatever they want. And what really happens in the real world is that somebody wants something and they benefit from it and they're really good at getting it done and nobody objects because they're complacent or they're apathetic and they don't realize what's happening. And then it happens and then everybody else is up in arms. What'd you do that for? When it's too late, right? So be careful about the argument that everybody wants this, or you haven't heard anybody object. It's because they're not paying attention.
Yeah,
right,
I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
I'm not
I'm
disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing.
I'm just saying, I guess when you say petition the government, there is referendum ways to get things onto a ballot, right? Citizens in most areas of government can make action if they get other people to agree with it. In this case,
Right.
just these people. You have to convince somebody in this room right here, right now, that this is a good idea, otherwise you're stuck in the water.
Well, actually, the entire zoning code is like that. The zoning code specifies that changes must be initiated by the planning commission or the city commission.
Yes, and that's
Right.
that's what I'm proposing would be amended to where
Right.
a proposal could be brought to the planning commission with,
Well-
I mean, that's up for discussion. I've brought it up a few times. So I don't know if
It's only a bit of
any
a,
traction, but to me, that's what
Right.
makes sense.
There is one, so something in our research that we found is that the way that the existing transient rental overlay district was expanded one time, and it was done through a rezoning process. So the four, if you look at the shape of it, it's like this kind of weird blob, and then there's like four that are kind of sticking out up at the top. That
Yeah.
was done through a rezoning application. We do have somebody that is contiguous to that district, one parcel away from the overlay, and we've advised them to fill out a rezoning application and bring that to you, and that'll be on your agenda next month.
I voted
So-
against that one. It was, I call it a gerrymander because it doesn't really even follow the code. It's supposed to be contiguous, and
Yeah.
so I
Well,
think
this one is
sidewalk connects that.
contiguous. So in that way, to your point, like, there is a way for residents that are touching the existing overlay to get into the overlay. We have a
If you're
formula,
there.
we have a process to do that, but there isn't, the only process to create a new overlay puts it on planning commission or city commission, that it is to be in a declining area in close proximity to commercial and retail area.
Thank you for that clarification, but that was helpful.
Let me throw something else out that I just heard of that probably part of this whole discussion. I just became aware that somebody with a decent-sized boat is advertising for Airbnb at a marina. So I think we're gonna start hearing about that off the top of my head. I don't know how the city feels about trying to control that, or if they care or whatever. And if you're gonna do it with boats, I can see it happening in mobile home parks. So,
If it's a boat, if it was in a boat, it's probably in a marina, which is probably in a commercial district that it would allow it. And I would imagine the private operator of the marina would be the one regulating whether the individual renting that slip would be allowed to.
If I
Almost like
may
sublet their.
touch
slip.
on that. I just did the research for this because I had someone call me recently on that question, like, are boats allowed to be Airbnb'd? And the answer is actually no, because based on the requirements, it has to be a structure, and the structure definition in the code calls out like a building, four corners, et cetera, et cetera. So because of that, transient is not allowed on boats.
so does the city intend to enforce that if that starts happening?
Yeah, so we would make code enforcement aware of this and,
Okay,
take it in
Okay.
whatever necessary direction.
You're citing Sandusky code, right? Not Airbnb rules?
That-
You are citing Sandusky code, not Airbnb rules or something?
Correct, that's
Thank
from
you.
the zoning code, yep.
Yeah, thank you.
okay,
So, Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Aaron, you said you prepared a brief, or you were in the process of doing that, and then are you going to circulate it to the planning commission?
Yeah, I should have sent it to you before today, but I didn't know that you were gonna be here until yesterday, so it was finished, it was sent out in November.
Okay. I was going to suggest that maybe that's a starting point for us to discuss this further and reach a conclusion from that. So I guess if everybody else has seen it, I guess the
We have
discussion.
somebody in attendance, and I'm thinking what you're saying, Mr. Bajali, is it's 7 o'clock. Yeah, so we're not going to solve this tonight, but I would like to hear from
Yeah, I would too.
the citizen that's here. Yes, come on back up.
I will not keep you guys, I apologize.
After we,
Thank you for being patient with me.
could we start with this discussion next time, maybe? Because I feel like we keep putting it on the end, and then we have to table it and table it. Maybe we could push it up on the agenda?
Well, the wisdom of Robert's Rules of Order is that you don't discuss anything without a motion. So accepting, of course, open discussion, work sessions and so forth, until I would invite somebody to come with a specific proposal. Otherwise, we're just making speeches. So I'd say, no, let's not start until somebody wants to propose something. But if you don't have anything specific, we've kind of beat this thing to death.
Okay, let's let the.
Okay. First of all, I agree with almost everything you said. I too did a lot of research on the impact of, again, I'm gonna refer to them as STRs, short-term rentals. And I agree, they're either over-regulated or under-regulated, and everybody is just trying to find a medium ground of where the residents are happy, the local governments are happy, and the tourists are happy. What I would say, just on a side note, hold the property managers accountable. And that's why I'm here. We have 2 properties that are also listed on Airbnb and Vrbo. They are in Perkins Township. We are in an industrial zoned area. That's why we got improved out there in Perkins. I gotta tell you, I've had a pretty good run with it. What I've discovered is most people that stay in Airbnbs, we have a larger home though, so it can accommodate larger groups. The one house we have sleeps 16, the other house we have sleeps 8. It's families that are wanting to come together and stay together versus booking 2 and 3 hotels. I'm gonna go ahead and read my statement because I'll ramble and I know you guys are trying to get out of here. Before today's meeting, I did a little research on the positive impact that STRs can bring to local communities. Obviously, there are the expected benefits of increased local economics and tax benefits, but STRs also help support local jobs. We hire professional cleaning services, landscapers, and utilize our local laundry services here in town. I personally made it a point to go to our local Erie Shores and Island Center downtown here to gather pamphlets that showcase what our area offers. I also created an information binder with all local suggestions from grocery stores to restaurants to local wineries. I make a consistent effort to be interactive with every guest I host. That being said, the research into STRs mainly leans into the negative impact that they can have on local communities, especially in residential neighborhoods. But in this research, I also found that there are many different factors that play into the acceptance and/or success of STRs, going back to regulations. Do you have noise hours? Do you limited? Do you have the noise alert systems that he said, electronic locks? There's all kinds of things nowadays with today's technology that you're able to monitor what's going on at your house while still giving your guests their peace of mind with privacy. While there are arguments on both sides, I can only speak to our experience here locally and my personal experience as a property manager. I understand that the horror stories of party houses and belligerent drunken tourists that run wild and quiet neighborhoods are nightmares for homeowners. But I have to say, it has been in my experience that most families visiting our area are here as families looking to relax and enjoy our area together. I have hosted professional anglers in national fishing tournaments, families attending baseball tournaments at Thor Sports, dance conventions at Kalahari, volleyball tournaments at Kalahari. We have also hosted contracted employees from Canada doing local work for Moochie Farms. I've even hosted groups of nurses that were just looking to get away to our area after during this pandemic. With every booking, I learned the story of what brings people to our town. The need for STRs is not just about party houses. Most people booking a vacation rental are looking to enjoy their vacation to get away with their loved ones, rather than having to book several hotel rooms with no kitchen, no laundry, little space, and crowded lobbies and pools. While our area offers plenty in the ways of hotels and motels, due to our area's short peak season for tourism, the demand for these rooms skyrocket along with the price. A single room in the summertime, 2 queen beds here in Sandusky, depending on the hotel, you can pay up to $600. Taking up a huge chunk of our travelers' budgets, ultimately leading to less spending in our area. Whereas at STR properties, families get to stay and play together, sharing the cost of that unit, and then hopefully letting that extra budget trickle down into our local economy. This will be our 3rd season this spring that we have been hosting on STR platforms. We pay all proper taxes, register with the county, and have annual inspections by the fire department. We do everything out of the book, or by the book. Out of the close to 300 bookings that we have had over the past 2 seasons, the police were called 1 time. I also managed around 40 properties for my employer, long-term units here, all within the city except for 1 that's out in Milan. And I honestly, by far, I have had far more issues with my long-term tenants than I have with my short-term. I want to reiterate that we are a local business. We're not some out-of-town investment firm looking to buy up blocks of houses and rent them to whoever pays first, decimating the local community or the local residents and driving up rent standards. We are local, and as the property manager, I pride myself on being heavily involved with the entire process and vetting our guests. From bookings to cleanings, I am involved every step of the way. I can be on site within 15 minutes on most days if there's an emergency, and if I can't, the owners can. You can look on the hosting platforms where we are listed and see nothing but 4- and 5-star reviews. We strive to make the guest stay a pleasant and memorable one. Although I can understand the hesitancy of some in regards to STRs, if ran properly, efficiently, and at a local level, STRs can be beneficial for our area as a whole. That's been my experience so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for sharing that. I think, I know Jamie, and she does everything first class. She's the real deal. But when you said about having more problems with long-term tenants, that's my problem. My problem is, what if this market falls off in, say, 5 or 6 years? What if it's no longer the hot market, the Airbnb market? You know how things go in cycles. And then you've got all this rental property. Like I said to the gentleman earlier, you've got a 6-family over in a residential area that maybe isn't the proper use for that site. So that's my concern. What happens, so many times we allow things and we don't think about, well, what's going to happen down the road if this business leaves and you got this building, or if you got this vacant site. Those kind of things are things I like to think about. But I'm not against the transient housing. That's just what's on my mind.
May I speak?
Yes.
I will say, Jamie keeps everything in town, and she's always planning and plotting and investing in the city.
She does a nice job.
If she were to buy any more properties specifically for transient housing, if the market collapses, and I imagine it will at some point, everything busts, she's going to keep them as long-term anyway. Or she would flip the house and sell it to somebody, and that's what, and as a real estate agent, she was also telling me, she understands the concern of expanding this zone into well-established neighborhoods that the houses have kept their value. You're talking about a lot of homeowners. She understands that there's certain areas that really shouldn't be messed with because these people are invested. What she was looking and hoping for was possibly some of the more underdeveloped streets and neighborhoods in our city that could be lifted up by outside fixer-uppers.
And that's explicit in the ordinance, and I think it's well stated, and I summarize it by saying we try to only do this where it'll do more good than harm, nowhere where it will do more harm than good. And the Cove District is just perfect. It has its charm, it has the proximity to the water, it has its appeal as for a visitor, and it needed help. And it's a huge success story in my opinion.
And some of the owners live down there. So some of the owners that own that property live down the Cove District, so they can keep an eye on it. So that's a plus.
The local residents have been very supportive of it. The entire on balance. So
I don't mean to prolong things, Mr. Chairman.
No.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Okay. We'll keep working on this. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good
All
evening,
right.
everyone.
Anybody have anything further to say?
I did wonder about the other thing, is that going to die a graceful?
No, I have a meeting, you're talking about the small box discount retail?
Right.
I listened to the meeting again from last month and wrote down the discussion and have a little, I can't remember what I wrote down, but I put an hour on Brendan's calendar because I need the law director to help to understand it and come up with, I think what I heard you all say is come up with a draft ordinance with some options for us to evaluate.
Right,
based
and I
on
was
that prior
pleased to learn in your last presentation that there are other cities doing this, and we're not like out in left field here, so there's,
Yeah, Brendan's first question was, is anyone doing this in Ohio?
right, you know you're gonna get some skepticism on this. I'm kind of, my first impression was, this isn't gonna go anywhere, nobody's gonna like it, but it turns out that maybe we're wrong on that first impression. Anyway, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Done.
Good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.